The silence of the nursing home was deafening that autumn morning. As I watched the leaves fall through the window of my tiny room, the loneliness weighed more heavily than all my 72 years of life combined. My name is William Harrison, and at that moment, I was just another old man discarded by his own family, a burden they had decided to abandon like someone discarding an old piece of furniture that no longer fits the decor. My own children, Nathan and Samantha, the ones I raised with so much love and sacrifice, had looked me in the eye 6 months earlier and said it would be better for everyone if I went to Sunshine Valley Retirement Home. Better for everyone, or better for them. I hadn't even received a phone call on my birthday. The last visit had been over 4 months ago, when Samantha showed up for exactly 20 minutes, more occupied with her cell phone than with me. And then, on that ordinary morning, the nursing home mailman delivered a letter that would completely change the course of my life. A letter from a lawyer I'd never heard of, informing me of an inheritance I'd never imagined. $77 million. My name written in a will from a distant uncle who'd made his fortune in real estate and never had children. The man I'd only known as a child had made me a multi-millionaire overnight. The first thing I felt wasn't joy, nor relief. It was a mixture of anger and determination. Finally, I would have the chance to show my children exactly what they'd thrown away. As I held that paper in my trembling hands, I recalled every moment that had led me to this point. Nathan and Samantha had grown up in a modest home in a Boston suburb. I had always worked as a public school history teacher, while my wife, Martha, taught piano lessons at home. We were never wealthy, but our children never lacked. Martha passed away 5 years ago, a victim of cancer that quickly consumed her and left a void in our family that has never been filled. I remember the funeral as if it were yesterday. Nathan, my eldest son, the successful executive who always seemed too busy, and Samantha, my youngest daughter, who married a wealthy man and rose through the ranks. They were both there, dressed in black, receiving condolences as if they were children who had lost their mother, but neither of them actually offered to care for me afterward. Soon after the funeral, the increasingly rare visits, the hurried phone calls, and the constant excuses began. Nathan said Chicago was too far away, that the demands of work were intense, that the children had activities. Samantha claimed her Beacon Hill home didn't have enough space, that her husband Derek worked from home and needed quiet, that her 10-year-old twins were too excitable for an elderly grandfather. And then, one January afternoon, as the snow fell heavily outside, they showed up at my house together. They sat on the couch their mother had so lovingly selected years ago and explained that they had found a wonderful place for me to live, where I would have professional assistance and the company of people my own age. The Sunshine Valley Retirement Home was an hour and a half from Boston and cost a fortune, practically my entire retirement fund and the money I'd made from selling the house. But Nathan assured me it was the best investment I could make, and Samantha had already prepared all the paperwork. All I needed to do was sign. Maybe it was the loneliness after losing Martha, maybe the fear of being a burden, or maybe the naive hope that they would visit me more now that they wouldn't have to care for me. I signed. For the first few months, they showed up sporadically. Nathan came once every 2 weeks, always checking his watch. Samantha brought the twins, Jacob and Emma, who seemed bored and glued to their phones, barely acknowledging their grandfather. Derek never showed up. Then the visits became monthly. Then only on special occasions. And finally, not even that. My last birthday passed without a trace. 72, and not even a phone call. No card. No message. Nurse Olivia, a young Puerto Rican woman with a kind smile, was the only person who brought me a cupcake with a single candle. And now, 6 months later, I held in my trembling hands a document that declared me the owner of $77 million. Uncle Arthur, my father's younger brother, the one who left for the West in the 1960s and never returned, had made his fortune in San Francisco real estate. With no children, no wife, no nephews other than me, he left everything to his dear nephew William. Attorney Michael Peterson wanted to meet me in person to discuss the details of the transfer and the investments. He would be in Boston the following week. After the nursing home director, Mrs. Winters, confirmed the authenticity of the letter and the law firm, I made a decision that would change everything. I wouldn't tell Nathan or Samantha. Not yet. First, I needed to experience freedom again. The next morning, I asked Olivia to help me call a taxi. I withdrew $5,000 from my savings, almost all I had left, and headed to a luxury hotel in downtown Boston. As I entered the lobby of the Fairmont Copley Plaza, I felt the strange looks. A white-haired man, wearing simple clothes a little too big for his thin frame, wasn't your typical guest. But when I handed over my credit card and booked the presidential suite for a week, the treatment changed instantly. The meeting with Michael Peterson took place 3 days later, in a private room at the hotel. He was a man in his 50s, impeccably dressed and carrying an Italian leather briefcase. After verifying my identity, he handed me a letter written by my Uncle Arthur shortly before his death, dated 2 months earlier. Dear William, if you're reading this, it means I've already departed this world. I've never been good at keeping in touch with my family, and I regret that. I've followed your life from afar through private investigators I've hired over the years. I know about your teaching career, your marriage to Martha, your 2 children, and now your grandchildren. I also know about Martha's death and how your children treated you afterward. I've always admired your integrity and dedication to your family, even when they didn't reciprocate. I've amassed a considerable fortune over my lifetime, and I have no one to leave it to but you. Use this money wisely, and perhaps to teach your children some values they seem to have forgotten. Your Uncle Arthur. Tears streamed down my face as I read those words. An uncle I barely knew had cared more about me in recent years than my own children. Michael explained that Arthur's fortune was even greater than the $77 million initially mentioned. With properties and investments, it amounted to nearly $90 million. It would all be transferred to me in the coming weeks, and he suggested a financial management plan that would allow me to live comfortably for the rest of my life, while also ensuring a legacy for future generations, if I so desired. As Michael talked about investments, taxes, and trust funds, an idea began to form in my head. I asked how much it would cost to buy a house in Beacon Hill, near where Samantha lived with her family. Michael replied that with my newfound wealth, practically any house in Boston was within my reach. I also asked about the possibility of buying a luxury car, something truly impressive. He mentioned Ferraris, Lamborghini, and Bentleys, names that had previously existed only in distant dreams for me. After Michael left, with all the documents signed and a plan for the coming weeks defined, I sat for hours on the balcony of my suite, overlooking the city that had been my home for so many decades. I thought about Martha, how she would have loved to travel the world with me, to see Paris and Rome as we'd always dreamed. I thought about how disappointed she would have been by our children's behavior. And I thought about how she would have laughed at the irony of fate, going from abandoned teacher in a nursing home to multimillionaire overnight. Over the next few days, I began putting together my plan. With the help of a personal assistant hired by the law firm, I began transforming my appearance. New clothes, custom-made by a renowned tailor. A haircut at one of the city's most exclusive salons. Even a new pair of designer glasses, which highlighted my blue eyes, the same ones Samantha had inherited, and who now barely remembered to look into mine. Then came the house. I didn't buy just any house on Beacon Hill, but a historic mansion just 2 blocks from Samantha and Derek's. 3 stories, 7 bedrooms, a private garden, a 5-car garage, and a stunning view of Boston Common. The house had belonged to a famous writer and was considered a city landmark. It cost $12 million. And then, the car. After an afternoon at the dealership, I chose a red Ferrari 812 Superfast, so shiny it almost hurt my eyes to look directly at it in the sun. The salesman was surprised when I paid in full, without financing. It's to impress some family members, I explained with an enigmatic smile. During these weeks of preparation, neither Nathan nor Samantha tried to contact me at the nursing home. Mrs. Winters, who had been treating me like royalty ever since she learned of my fortune, confirmed that no one had called asking for me. Finally, a month after the arrival of that letter that changed everything, I was ready for my grand entrance. It was a sunny spring Saturday, and I knew from Michael, who had discreetly investigated, that Samantha's entire family would be home. Derek had cancelled a golf outing due to a minor ankle injury, and the twins had no extracurricular activities that weekend. I donned my custom-made Italian suit, slipped my new Rolex on my wrist, a small gift I decided to give myself, and drove my gleaming Ferrari through the streets of Boston to Beacon Hill. I parked right in front of the 3-story red brick house where Samantha lived with her family. I took a deep breath, adjusted my tie one last time, and rang the doorbell. The next few seconds felt like an eternity. Finally, the door opened. It was Derek, my son-in-law, leaning lightly on a cane due to his injury. He looked at me confused, clearly not recognizing me right away with my new look. "Can I help you?" he asked, his gaze shifting between me and the car parked behind me. "Hello, Derek. Is Samantha home? I'd like to speak to my daughter." His eyes widened, finally realizing who I was. The color drained from his face. "Mr. Harrison? William. We didn't expect. How?" Before he could form a complete sentence, Samantha appeared behind him, drawn by the conversation at the door. She froze when she saw me, her expression a mixture of shock and confusion. "Dad. What? How did you get here? Is this your car?" "Hello, dear. Yes, I bought it yesterday. Do you like the color? I always thought red suited me, although your mother always preferred more muted tones." The twins, Jacob and Emma, appeared behind her, their eyes glued not to me, but to the Ferrari parked on the street. "Grandpa, is this your car?" Jacob asked, his voice brimming with excitement. "Yes, it is, Jacob. Maybe later I can take you for a ride, if your parents allow it, of course." Derek and Samantha exchanged glances, still frozen in surprise. "Dad, what happened? You ran away from the nursing home? We're worried. We tried calling there last week and..." Samantha began, her voice betraying her nervousness. "Oh, they tried calling, did they? Interesting, considering no calls have been logged in the last 6 months. Not even on my birthday." My voice was calm but firm. "But no, I didn't run away. In fact, I left legally, after paying all outstanding fees and reporting to management. I'm just stopping by to see how you're doing and give you some updates." "What news?" Derek asked, his tone now more interested than concerned. "Well, it's a long story. Can I come in? Or would you rather we talk here at the door, in front of the neighbors and my $500,000 Ferrari?" The silence that followed was almost comical. Derek practically jumped aside, making way for me to enter, while Samantha forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The living room at Samantha and Derek's house was exactly as I'd imagined, impeccably decorated with expensive furniture that looked like it had never been used, more of a showroom than a home. Expensive abstract paintings on the walls, a grand piano I doubted anyone could play, and white sofas no one felt comfortable sitting on. Martha would have hated it. "So, Dad, you look different," Samantha began, as I settled into one of the living room chairs. The twins had been sent to their room, much to their disappointment, as they clearly wanted to know more about the car and their suddenly stylish grandfather. "Different how, dear? Better dressed? Healthier? Or just richer?" I asked with a calm smile, enjoying the discomfort evident on her face. "All of those things, I guess. What happened? How did you..." Derek hesitated, clearly struggling to find a polite way to ask about my sudden wealth. "How did I manage to get from that place where you left me and suddenly show up driving a Ferrari? Is that what you want to know, Derek?" "Father, it's not fair to say we left you there. It was a mutual decision, for your own good. You needed care we couldn't provide," Samantha protested, her defensive tone betraying her guilt. I held up my hand, gently interrupting her. "Let's be honest with each other, at least for now. You put me in Sunshine Valley because I was an inconvenience. A constant reminder of mortality, an obstacle to your perfectly curated lifestyles. And that's okay, I get it. I really do. But what I can't forgive is the abandonment afterward. Not even a phone call on my birthday, Samantha. Your mother would never have forgotten something like that." The words hit Samantha like a slap. Her eyes filled with tears, but I could tell they were more from embarrassment than genuine regret. Derek, ever the pragmatist, decided to change the subject. William, you still haven't told us what happened. This car, your clothes. Oh yes. I received an inheritance. My uncle Arthur, my father's younger brother, passed away a few months ago in San Francisco. He made his fortune in real estate and, without children or a wife, left it all to me. $77 million, to be exact. Plus the properties. The silence that followed was deafening. Derek paled visibly, and Samantha gaped, unable to formulate a response. Finally, it was Derek who broke the silence. 77 million? That's unbelievable. What a blessing for our family. I noticed the use of our family, as if inheritance were somehow a shared family resource. Yes, a blessing for me, no doubt. A new beginning, as you can imagine. Speaking of which, I also bought a house. That historic mansion on Lewisburg Square, just 2 blocks from here. I'm moving in next week. That $12 million house? Derek asked, his voice almost trailing off. You bought the Montgomery house? Yes, that's the name. Beautiful property, with a wonderful view. I thought I'd stay close to my family, you know? Since I now have the means to not be a burden. The jab was subtle, but certainly felt. Samantha cleared her throat, trying to regroup her thoughts in light of this new reality. Dad, that's wonderful. We're so happy for you. And of course, we'll love having you around. The twins will be thrilled. Of course they will, I replied, keeping my tone light. By the way, where's your brother? I'll need to break the news to Nathan too. He's in Chicago as usual, Samantha replied quickly. But I'm sure we can arrange a visit soon. He'll be as surprised as we are. Oh, don't worry. I've already booked a private jet to Chicago for next Tuesday. I thought I'd pay him a surprise visit, too. Maybe even buy an apartment there so he can be close to his other grandchildren. Derek and Samantha exchanged worried glances. A private jet, Derek murmured, as if trying to process the scale of the change in my financial situation. Yes, it's more convenient. And speaking of convenience, I was wondering if the twins would like to spend some time with me in the new house. I have an entire wing dedicated to them, with a game room, private movie theater, heated pool. Sure, I know they're busy with school and activities, but maybe on the weekends? After all, I've missed so much time with them. Samantha's eyes sparkled with a mixture of surprise and calculation. I could almost see the gears turning in her mind, the social advantages of having a multimillionaire father, the doors it would open, the opportunities for the twins. I'm sure we can rearrange their schedules, she said, her tone suddenly solicitous. They'd love to spend more time with you. Wouldn't they, Derek? Absolutely, Derek agreed quickly. In fact, we were just talking about how much we missed you, weren't we, dear? Their brazenness almost made me laugh. 6 months without a single visit, and now suddenly they missed me. Money really did have an interesting power over people. That's good to hear, I replied calmly, rising from the chair. Well, I won't take up any more of your time today. I have a meeting with my new financial manager to discuss some investments. But feel free to visit my new home as soon as the move is complete. Maybe we can have a family dinner, like old times. Derek hurried to walk me to the door, suddenly attentive. Let me help you with your coat, William. And please, if you need anything, we're here for you. Anything at all. As I walked toward my car, I could feel Derek and Samantha's eyes on my back, and the twins' curious faces pressed against the second-story window. Before getting into the Ferrari, I turned to them with a smile. Oh, I almost forgot to mention. I'm planning a trip around the world next year. Paris, Rome, Tokyo, Sydney. All the places your mother and I always dreamed of seeing together. If you'd like to join me on any part of the trip, just let me know. I'm chartering a yacht in the Mediterranean for a month. With that, I got in the car and drove off, leaving them gaping at the front door, the sight of my Ferrari disappearing around the corner. Phase 1 of my plan was complete. Now it was time to visit Nathan in Chicago. The flight to Chicago on the private jet I'd chartered was a surreal experience. Sitting in a leather chair that cost more than my annual teaching salary, being served by an attentive flight attendant, I couldn't help but think about how dramatically my life had changed in a matter of weeks. Watching the clouds below, I thought of Martha again. She'd always been the sensible one in our relationship, the one who kept my feet on the ground while I rambled on about history books and ancient civilizations. What would she say about all this? About our children? About my plan? Nathan lived in a luxury condominium in the Gold Coast, one of Chicago's most exclusive neighborhoods. His apartment was on the 30th floor, overlooking Lake Michigan. When I arrived at his building, the doorman was initially hesitant to let me up unannounced, but when I mentioned that I was Nathan Harrison's father and showed my identification, he relented. "Mr. Harrison doesn't get many family visits," he commented politely but revealingly. Standing in front of my son's apartment door, I hesitated for a moment. Nathan had always been the most like me, introspective, a bit reserved, passionate about books. Before becoming an executive at a major tech company, he would spend hours discussing ancient history with me, asking questions whose depth surprised me. Somewhere along the way, that curious boy had transformed into a man obsessed with success and status, someone who saw his own father as an obstacle in his perfectly planned life. With a sigh, I rang the doorbell. The look of shock on Nathan's face when he opened the door and saw me was almost identical to his sister's just days before. His eyes, his mother's same brown eyes, widened, and he nearly dropped the glass of whiskey he was holding. "Dad. How did you get here?" "Hello, Nathan. May I come in? Or would you prefer to continue this conversation in the hallway?" My voice was calm, almost amused at his obvious surprise. He stepped aside automatically, allowing me to enter. The apartment was exactly as I'd imagined. Minimalist, impeccable, with designer pieces by famous names and a stunning view through the floor-to-ceiling windows. There were no family photos in sight, no evidence that he'd ever had parents, or a childhood. "Dad, what's going on? You're supposed to be in Sunshine Valley. Do they know you're here? Did you run away or something?" The questions came in a rush, as he watched me with a mixture of confusion and embarrassment. "No, Nathan, I didn't run away. I left there officially, after settling all accounts. And I came to Chicago to visit you and give you some news." "News? What kind of news?" he asked, clearly nervous. I noticed he hadn't yet offered me a seat, a drink, or any other basic gesture of hospitality. The kind of news that changes lives. "But first, maybe we can sit down?" It was a long flight, even on a private jet. "Private jet," he repeated, now completely confused. "What are you talking about? How did you pay for a jet?" I smiled and walked toward the designer sofa, sitting down without waiting for an invitation. "This is just the news I came to bring you. I received an inheritance, Nathan. From your great-uncle Arthur. Remember him? My father's younger brother, who went west in the 60s. Nathan shook his head, still standing, still holding his glass of whiskey like a shield. "Well, he made his fortune in San Francisco real estate. And when he passed away a few months ago, he left it all to me. $77 million, plus properties." The glass slipped from Nathan's hand and fell onto the pristine white carpet, spilling the amber liquid in a rapidly spreading stain. He didn't even seem to notice. $77 million? That's plenty of money, yes. Enough to buy a mansion in Boston, near your sister's house. Enough to rent private jets and buy Ferraris. Enough to never need anyone's help again. The jab didn't go unnoticed. Nathan finally moved, running to the kitchen to get something to clean the carpet, probably more to save time than out of any real concern for the stain. When he returned, his face had regained some of its composure, though his voice still betrayed his shock. "Dad, that's amazing. I'm really happy for you. I'm sure you are, I replied dryly. Just like your sister was when I told her a few days ago. Suddenly, everyone is so happy to have me around. Curious, isn't it? Nathan at least had the decency to look embarrassed as he bent down to clean up the stain. Look, Dad, I know I haven't been the most present son lately. Work has been crazy, the constant traveling. 6 months. Nathan. 6 months without a visit. Not even a call on my birthday. He stopped cleaning and looked at me, a mixture of guilt and defensiveness on his face. I know. I have no excuses. It's just, life happened, and Life happened. Is that what you call abandoning your father in a nursing home after promising it would be temporary, just until I adjusted to life without your mother? It wasn't like that, Dad. Sunshine Valley is one of the best places in the area. It cost a fortune. My fortune, you mean? Practically all my savings and the money from the sale of the house where you grew up. Nathan stood up, tossing the now stained cloth onto the coffee table. What do you want me to say? That I'm sorry? Okay, I'm sorry. I should have visited more, called more. But I also have my life, my career. I couldn't just drop everything to take care of you. Nobody asked you to drop everything, Nathan. Just to remember you had a dad. To maybe set aside an hour a month for a visit, or 5 minutes for a call on my birthday. A heavy silence fell over us. For the first time since I arrived, I saw something genuine in my son's face. A mixture of shame, regret, and confusion. And now? What are you going to do with all this money? He asked finally, his voice softer. Living the life your mother and I always dreamed of. Traveling the world, seeing places we've only seen in books. Maybe funding some scholarships for young history teachers. And well, I thought about spending more time with my grandchildren, who barely know me. Have you seen the children? Sarah and Daniel. Not yet. But I plan to. I bought them some gifts. And I was thinking about maybe buying a vacation home on Lake Michigan so we could spend our summers together. If you're interested, of course. I could see the calculation in Nathan's eyes, the quick reassessment of the value I now represented in his carefully curated life. From an inconvenient elderly father to a multimillionaire with mansions and private jets. Of course I'm interested, Dad. The kids would love to spend more time with you. Maybe we can take that trip to Rome you've always wanted, all together. A family trip. A family trip, I repeated, noticing how false the words sounded coming out of his mouth. Just like the old days, right? When your mother was still alive and you still had time for family. Nathan swallowed, clearly uncomfortable with my bluntness. Dad, I know I've made mistakes. We all do. But we can start over now, can't we? A new chance. A second chance, I murmured, getting up from the couch. Maybe. Time will tell. For now, I'm staying at the peninsula. I have dinner with some financial advisors tonight. But maybe we can have lunch tomorrow? You, me, and the kids. It would be good to see them. Sure, Nathan replied quickly, almost too eagerly. I'll call their school right now. They'll be so excited. I'm sure they will be. Especially when they see the gifts I brought. New PlayStation 5s for each of them, state-of-the-art tablets, and a few other little things. Nathan's eyes lit up, not because of the generosity toward his children, but because of what it meant. A wealthy father willing to spend, to become a source of expensive gifts and opportunities. You didn't have to, Dad. But thank you. I walked toward the door, feeling a weariness that wasn't just physical. One last thing, Nathan. I'm updating my will next week. You and your sister are in it, of course, as are my grandchildren. But I'm also creating some interesting conditions. My lawyer suggested some incentives to ensure certain family responsibilities are met. I left the sentence hanging in the air, deliberately vague. Nathan stiffened, the implication clear. No need, Dad. We're family. We'll be there for you, money or not. That's good to hear, son. See you tomorrow then. Noon at the Four Seasons? They have a wonderful brunch, I hear. When I left Nathan's apartment, I felt a mixture of sadness and satisfaction. The look on his face when I mentioned the will was worth every penny I'd spent on that trip. Was it petty of me? Maybe. Martha would probably have scolded me for using money as a weapon. But she wasn't here to see how our children had treated us, how they'd discarded their father when he became inconvenient. Lunch the next day went exactly as expected. Nathan arrived 10 minutes early, a first for a man who always prided himself on his busy schedule. His children, Sarah, 12, and Daniel, 10, were dressed as if they were going to an admissions interview at an elite school, which probably wasn't far from the truth, knowing Nathan's obsession with status and appearances. They were polite but distant, clearly unsure how to interact with the grandfather they barely knew, beyond mechanically thanking him for the expensive gifts. Looking at those children, I could barely recognize my own grandchildren. When was the last time I saw them actually smile or act like children, rather than miniatures of the ambitious adults their parents wanted them to become? After returning to Boston, my days took on a new routine. The move into the Lewisburg Square mansion was completed with the help of an army of professionals hired by Michael Peterson. Every detail was considered to create a space that combined luxury with comfort, something that reflected my new financial reality while still maintaining touches of my personality. I insisted on bringing some of the older furniture that had been stored when I sold the house. Martha's favorite armchair, the desk where I'd graded student papers for decades, the old wall clock that had belonged to my father. These objects seemed strange amid the luxury of the renovated mansion, but they were important to me, reminders of who I truly was. The first few weeks were a constant parade of casual visits from Samantha and her family. Suddenly, they were available every weekend, bringing the twins, who now begged to use the heated pool and game room I'd had installed especially for them. Derek, my son-in-law, suddenly discovered an interest in real estate investing and always found a moment to ask me about my portfolio and diversification strategies. Nathan called almost daily from Chicago, casually mentioning his upcoming vacation and how wonderful it would be if we could all spend time together at the mansion, or perhaps on a trip to Europe. It was all so transparent, so obviously self-serving, that sometimes I had to restrain myself from laughing outright at the situation. The same son and daughter who couldn't find time for a birthday party 6 months ago were now rearranging their impossible schedules to spend every free moment with me. The same grandchildren who barely looked at me now called me Grandpa in sweet, practiced voices. On a particularly warm June afternoon, I was sitting in the mansion's back garden, enjoying the shade of a century-old oak tree, when Samantha appeared alone, a rare occurrence, as she was usually accompanied by Derek or the twins. "Dad, can we talk?" she asked, sitting down in the chair next to me without waiting for an answer. "Of course, dear. Did something happen?" She hesitated, nervously adjusting the sleeve of her silk blouse. "Actually, I wanted to talk about the twins. About their future." "Their future? What about that?" "Well, they're entering an important phase of their academic lives. Soon we'll need to start thinking about preparatory schools, and then colleges. The best institutions are, well, they're expensive." Ah, so that was it. Money for the grandchildren's education. Almost too predictable. I see. And you're worried about the expenses? Not exactly worried, Dad. Derek makes a good living, but with the market the way it is, and the costs of elite schools rising every year. She trailed off, looking at me expectantly. "And you want to know if I intend to help with these expenses? Is that it?" "Well, yes. Not right now, of course. But perhaps we could discuss some kind of educational fund for them? Something that would ensure they have access to the best possible opportunities." I watched my daughter for a moment, trying to find some trace of the girl who once cried in my arms when her first boyfriend broke up with her, or who spent hours helping Martha bake cookies to sell to benefit the local library. Where was that Samantha? You know Samantha. It's funny. When your mother and I worked hard to pay for your and your brother's college, we never asked for anything in return. Just the satisfaction of seeing you achieve your dreams was enough for us. She looked away, a faint blush appearing on her cheeks. I know, Dad. And we're grateful for that. We really are. Are they? Because somewhere in the last few years, it seems like you two completely forgot the sacrifices we made. The years your mother gave you extra piano lessons to ensure you could attend summer camp. The extra hours I worked grading papers to pay for your ballet lessons or Nathan's baseball team. Dad, that's not fair. We were kids. We didn't understand. I'm not talking about when they were kids, Samantha. I'm talking about when they decided I was no longer worthy of their time or consideration. When they left me in that nursing home and barely bothered to call to see if I was alive or dead. Tears began to form in her eyes, but I couldn't tell if they were from genuine regret or frustration at not getting what she wanted. We made mistakes, Dad. I admit that. But we're trying to make things right now. We're here, aren't we? They've been here since they found out about the money. Before that, where were they? The silence that followed was heavy, laden with unspoken truths. As for the twins, I continued finally, don't worry. I've already talked to Michael about setting up educational funds for all my grandchildren. Each of them will have access to sufficient resources to attend any institution they desire, as long as they maintain good grades and demonstrate commitment to their studies. The relief on Samantha's face was immediate and undisguised. Thank you, Dad. This means a lot to us. To them. I'm sure they will. But those funds will come with strings attached, Samantha. His smile faltered. Conditions? What kind of conditions? Conditions that encourage family values and responsibility. The funds will be administered by trustees, and disbursements will be subject to certain checks. One of them will be the time the twins spend with their grandfather. Regular visits, not just when they need money or access to the pool. Samantha looked genuinely confused. But they love spending time with you, Dad. You must have noticed how excited they are to come here. Yes, to use the pool, play video games in the game room, or receive expensive gifts. But how much time do they actually spend with me? Talking, getting to know their grandfather as a person, not just as a provider of material things. She had no answer for that, and we both knew why. The twins rarely interacted with me beyond the obligatory thanks for gifts and the mansion's amenities. They knew nothing about my life as a teacher, my passions, my stories. And why would they? Their parents never valued that kind of connection. I'll think of something, Samantha murmured finally. Maybe we can arrange weekly dinners, just you and them, with no distractions. So you can really get to know each other. That would be a start, I replied without much enthusiasm. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a scheduled call with Michael about some investments. She stood, still visibly uncomfortable with the direction the conversation had taken. Before leaving, she stopped and turned to me. Dad, you never told us exactly how you found out about the inheritance. How did your uncle contact you at the nursing home? The question caught me off guard, not because of its content, but because of its timing. Why ask it now, after almost 2 months? He didn't contact me directly. His lawyer sent me a letter after his death informing me about the will. And why would he leave everything to you? You weren't even close, from what I understand. The question had a slightly accusatory tone, as if she were questioning the legitimacy of my inheritance. Or perhaps looking for some loophole, some way to contest the will if things didn't turn out as she hoped. Apparently, he followed my life from afar through private investigators. He knew about my teaching career, my marriage to your mother, the two of you, and even how you treated me after she passed away. He mentioned in the letter that he admired my integrity and dedication to my family, even when it wasn't reciprocated. I suppose he saw qualities in me that he valued. Samantha paled slightly. He knew about the asylum? Yes, I knew everything, including the lack of visits and calls. She nodded slowly, processing this information. I see. Well, I'll leave it to your call then. As I watched her walk away across the garden, I thought about how this conversation would likely be reported to Derek and Nathan. How old William was using the money to manipulate them, to make them feel guilty. How unfair it was that they had to earn access to funds that, in their minds, should already be rightfully theirs. Over the next few months, I noticed subtle changes in my family's behavior. Visits remained frequent, but there was a different quality to them now. An added layer of calculation, more careful about what they said and how they acted. Nathan decided to work remotely from Boston for a few weeks, settling into a nearby hotel with his children. He vaguely mentioned marital problems with his wife, Lisa, something he'd never shared before, as if I'd suddenly become his confidant. Samantha began bringing old photo albums during her visits, reminiscing about childhood stories, asking about memories from when Martha was still alive, a transparent exercise in manufactured nostalgia. The grandchildren, in turn, were clearly instructed to show more interest in me. Sarah and Daniel, Nathan's children, suddenly wanted to know everything about my years as a history teacher, asking rehearsed questions about the Civil War or the ancient Egyptians. Samantha's twins now insisted on showing me their homework, seeking my approval for good grades, something they had never done before. It was all so artificial, so obviously orchestrated, that sometimes I had a hard time not calling them out on it. But then I remembered what Michael had said during one of our lunches. "Mr. Harrison, you may not be able to change who they are fundamentally, but you can encourage them to behave like the family you deserve. Sometimes, people doing the right thing for the wrong reasons is still better than doing nothing at all." And so, we established a new family dynamic. I pretended not to notice the phoniness, and they pretended they had always been devoted children and grandchildren. I organized vacations for everyone, a week in Tuscany, where I rented an entire villa, a Caribbean cruise on a private yacht, a winter retreat in Aspen with private ski instructors. During these trips, I watched as Nathan and Samantha subtly competed for my attention and approval, each trying to position themselves, and their children, as the most deserving of my fortune. One particularly pleasant evening during our stay in Tuscany, I was sitting on the villa's balcony, enjoying a glass of local wine and watching the sunset over the vineyards. Derek approached, holding his own glass. "May I join you, William?" he asked, with that smile I had learned to interpret as his business manner, the same one he probably used to close important deals. "Sure, Derek. Enjoy the view. Amazing, isn't it?" "Absolutely stunning," he agreed, sitting in the chair next to me. "You know, I've been thinking a lot lately. About family, legacies, the future." "Really? And what did you conclude?" He took a sip of wine, as if gathering courage. "Well, seeing how you've embraced this new chapter of your life, how generous you've been to us, I've started to question some of my own priorities. Maybe I was too focused on career, on status. Maybe I encouraged us to make decisions I now regret. How do I get into Sunshine Valley?" I asked directly, without beating around the bush. Derek had the decency to look embarrassed. "Yes. Among other things. Looking back, I see we could have found a better solution. Maybe you could have stayed with us, or we could have hired caretakers for our home." "And why didn't they do that, Derek? Why the rush to send me away?" He hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "Honestly, it was selfish. Concern for our privacy, for our routine. And maybe a little fear." "Afraid? Of what?" "Of growing old. Of seeing in you a reminder of what we will all eventually become. Losing Martha was a shock to all of us, and I don't think anyone wanted to face the fact that you wouldn't be here forever either." Honesty took me by surprise. Of all people, I didn't expect Derek to be the first to admit the true reasons behind his behavior. "Thank you for saying that," I finally replied. "It's more than Samantha or Nathan have been able to admit so far." Derek nodded, looking down at the wine in his glass. "They have their own pride to deal with. And guilt, a lot of it. But they're trying, in their own way." "Their way," I repeated, unable to completely hide the sarcasm in my voice. "You mean, now that there are 77 million reasons to try?" Derek didn't answer immediately, and for a moment I thought he'd deny the obvious. Instead, he surprised me again. Money has changed the dynamic, I won't deny that. It would be hypocritical to say otherwise. But sometimes we need a jolt to make us reevaluate our choices. Money has been that jolt for us. What if I lost everything tomorrow? What if they discovered the will was invalid? Or that my uncle's fortune had hidden debts? Honestly, there would probably be an adjustment period. Maybe a few fewer visits, fewer phone calls. But I think something has fundamentally changed in all of us in the last few months. Seeing you like this, strong, confident, living your life to the fullest, has made us realize what we lost when we pushed you away. Money or not, that can't be unlearned. I looked at my son-in-law with newfound respect. Maybe there was more to him than I'd given him credit for. Or maybe he was simply better at telling me what I wanted to hear than my own children. I hope you're right, Derek. For all our sakes. He raised his glass in a silent toast, and we went back to watching the sunset, each of us lost in our own thoughts. As the first year of my new life drew to a close, I began to reflect on what had truly changed. Outwardly, everything was different. I lived in a mansion, drove luxury cars, traveled the world, and was courted by children and grandchildren who previously barely had time for me. But inwardly, I was still the same William Harrison, the history professor who loved old books and long conversations, who missed Martha every day, who wondered if he had been a good father, and where he had gone wrong to make his children so far removed from the values he had tried to instill in them. On a particularly nostalgic day, I decided to visit the cemetery where Martha was buried. I hadn't been there since before I was sent to the asylum, and I felt an almost physical need to talk to her, to share everything that had happened. I brought flowers, white lilies, her favorite, and spent several hours sitting beside her grave, telling her about the inheritance, how our children had reacted, and my travels and experiences. I spoke of my doubts, my unresolved resentments, and my confusion about how to proceed. At some point, tears began to stream down my face, not just from missing her, but from the loss of something else, the family we thought we had built, the children we thought we knew. "Sir, is everything okay?" The gentle voice startled me. It was a middle-aged woman with gray hair and a kind face, holding her own flowers. "Oh yeah. Just talking to my wife," I replied, wiping away the tears with the back of my hand. "I understand completely. I do the same with my husband." She pointed to a headstone a few feet away. 25 years together, and I still have so much to tell him. 38 years in my case, I said with a small smile. And it seems the most important stories happened after she left. The woman nodded understandingly. "It's always like that, isn't it? Life keeps surprising us, for better or worse." We chatted for a few minutes. Her name was Eleanor, she was a retired music teacher, and her husband, Richard, had been a pediatrician. There was something comforting about talking to someone who understood the loss, someone who wasn't interested in my newfound wealth or what they could gain from me. We exchanged phone numbers before parting ways, with a vague promise to perhaps grab coffee sometime. When I returned home, I found Nathan waiting in the living room, absently leafing through an architecture magazine. He stood up immediately when he saw me. "Dad, where were you? We were worried. You didn't answer your cell phone." "I went to visit your mother," I replied simply, hanging up my coat. "I needed to talk to her." Nathan looked disconcerted for a moment, as if he'd forgotten his mother was buried less than 10 kilometers away. When was the last time he'd visited her grave? "Why? We could have gone with you. I needed to go alone this time. I had a lot to tell her." He nodded, clearly uncomfortable. "I see. Well, I just stopped by to let you know that Samantha is organizing a dinner for her birthday next week. She wants to do something special at the mansion. A grand celebration. My birthday. The same one they'd completely forgotten the year before, when I was in the nursing home. Now suddenly, it deserved a celebration in style. It's not necessary, Nathan. I prefer something simple. Maybe just us, family. But it's your 73rd birthday, Dad. We should celebrate properly. Samantha's already hired an award-winning chef, and—" "Nathan," I interrupted firmly, I appreciate the gesture, but I don't want a big party. If you really want to celebrate with me, I'd prefer a simple dinner, just us. No award-winning chefs, no extravagances." He looked genuinely confused, as if he couldn't understand why anyone would refuse such an ostentatious celebration. "Okay, if that's what you want. I'll talk to Samantha. Thank you. Now, if you'll excuse me, it's been an emotionally exhausting day." When I went upstairs to my room, I realized something fundamental had shifted within me. In the months since receiving my inheritance, I had used money as a tool, sometimes as a weapon, to regain my children's attention and respect. I had secretly delighted in watching them squirm and reposition themselves, trying to secure their place in my fortune. I had savored the irony of the situation, the twist of fate. But none of it had brought me peace or true reconnection with my family. Sitting on the edge of my king-size bed, in a room larger than my entire old nursing home apartment, I felt suddenly empty. The money had changed everything on the outside, but it hadn't addressed the real issue, the emotional distance that had grown between us over the years, long before the nursing home, probably since Martha became ill, or perhaps even before. That night, I made a decision. It was time for a different approach. No more games, no more veiled manipulation, no more using money as bait or threat. It was time for brutal honesty, whatever the outcome. My birthday arrived on a bright autumn morning, similar to the day I received that fateful letter at the nursing home a year earlier. As I'd requested, Samantha hosted a simple dinner at home, just for the family, herself and Derek, the twins, Nathan, and his children. To everyone's surprise, I also invited Eleanor, the woman I'd met at the cemetery and with whom I'd kept in touch through occasional coffees. We weren't romantic partners, just friends who shared the experience of loss and an appreciation for the simple things in life. Her presence that evening was no accident. I wanted someone outside the family dynamic, someone who knew me as William, the retired professor, not as William, the multimillionaire. Dinner started tensely, with my children and their spouses clearly uncomfortable with the presence of an outsider at a family affair. The grandchildren, on the other hand, were more relaxed, chatting animatedly with Eleanor about music, as she had taught piano for decades. After dessert, a simple chocolate cake, Martha's favorite, instead of the elaborate, multi-tiered dessert Samantha had initially ordered, I cleared my throat and asked for everyone's attention. "I want to thank everyone for being here today. As you know, my last birthday was quite lonely." I noticed the discomfort on Nathan and Samantha's faces. "But today I don't want to talk about the past. Or rather, I want to talk about the past only so we can move forward." I took a sip of water, gathering my thoughts. This past year has been extraordinary, for obvious reasons. My uncle's inheritance has changed my life in ways I never imagined possible. But it's also changed our family dynamic, and not always for the better. Derek and Samantha exchanged nervous glances, while Nathan shifted in his chair, visibly tense. On the one hand, I've spent more time with you guys this year than in the previous 5 years combined, which is wonderful. On the other hand, I know some of this renewed attention has more to do with my bank account than with true family reconnection. "Dad, that's not fair," Samantha protested immediately. "Of course we're happy about your good fortune, but we're here because you're our father, because we care." "Samantha's right," Nathan agreed. "Yes, we've made mistakes in the past, but this year has been about rebuilding our family, not about money." I raised my hand to gently interrupt them. "Please let me finish. I'm not accusing anyone. I'm simply acknowledging the reality of the situation. And the reality is that all of us, myself included, have been using this money as an excuse to avoid the difficult conversations we need to have." Eleanor smiled encouragingly as her grandchildren watched with a mixture of confusion and fascination. They had probably never seen adults in their family having such a frank conversation. "So, I've made some decisions. First, I've updated my will. Each of you, Nathan, Samantha, and all my grandchildren, will receive a significant portion of my fortune when I'm gone. There will be no conditions, no demands for visitation or displays of affection. The money will be yours, no strings attached." Derek's eyes widened slightly, while Nathan and Samantha looked confused at this turn of events. But, I continued, that's for the future. For the present, I have a different request. I want real time with each of you. Not orchestrated visits where everyone pretends everything is fine. Not lavish trips where money distracts from real conversations. I want to know my grandchildren as people, not just as heirs. I want to understand what happened to our family, how we got to a point where putting your father in a nursing home and forgetting about him seemed acceptable. A heavy silence fell over the table. It was Jacob, one of Samantha's twins, who broke it. Grandpa, can I spend time with you? Seriously, I mean, you have so many interesting stories, and I hardly ever get a chance to hear them with everyone always around. His innocent comment brought a genuine smile to my face. My first of the night. Sure, Jacob. I'd love that. One by one, the other grandchildren made similar offers. Reading afternoons, help with history homework, even an invitation to watch a school baseball game. Small gestures, but meaningful in their authenticity. Nathan was the first of the adults to speak. Dad, you're right. We've been avoiding the difficult conversations. And yes, money made it easier to pretend everything was okay when it clearly wasn't. I'm sorry, not just about the nursing home, but for all the years before that, when I slowly drifted away. Martha would be disappointed in me, and I'm disappointed in myself. And me too, Dad, Samantha added, tears in her eyes. We were raised better than this. You and Mom taught us about family, about being there for us in the hard times, not just the easy ones. Somewhere along the line, we forgot those lessons. Derek, surprisingly, was the most direct. We were driven by greed and convenience, William. Simple as that. And while it's easy to say we've learned our lesson now, the truth is that only time will tell if we've truly changed. But I appreciate your honesty and your generosity in not disowning us when it would have been completely justified. Eleanor watched it all with an expression of quiet approval, occasionally adding an observation that helped keep the conversation on track when it threatened to veer into recriminations or self-defense. By the end of the evening, while the grandchildren were already drowsy and the adults emotionally exhausted, I felt something had shifted. Not a huge, dramatic transformation, but the beginning of something more authentic. The recognition that money had been both a blessing and a curse, allowing us to reconnect physically, but also making it easier to avoid the real emotional issues. In the months that followed, our family dynamic began to shift in subtle but important ways. Visits remained frequent, but there was less ostentation, less mention of extravagant trips or expensive gifts. Instead, I spent quiet afternoons with each of my grandchildren individually, helping Sarah with her Civil War history project, playing chess with Daniel, watching Emma's flute performance at school, building model airplanes with Jacob. Nathan began visiting Martha's grave regularly, sometimes inviting me along, other times choosing to go alone. On one of these shared visits, he confessed to me that his marriage was truly ending. It wasn't just an excuse to be in Boston, and that he feared he was making the same mistakes with his children as he had with me. "How did you and Mom make it look so easy?" he asked, genuinely curious about how Martha and I had maintained a strong marriage for nearly 4 decades. Samantha, for her part, began bringing the twins to the mansion for Sunday lunches, but insisted on cooking herself, refusing the offer of professional chefs. Her recipes weren't always perfect, but there was something deeply comforting in watching my daughter struggle in the kitchen, recalling Martha's recipes, and teaching the twins how to make the family's signature pasta sauce. Derek, surprisingly, became an occasional confidant. We had more in common than I realized: a love of military history, an interest in gardening, and an appreciation for contemplative silence. He began spending afternoons in the garden with me, helping with the rose bushes I had planted in Martha's honor. Eleanor remained a constant presence in my life, a valuable friend and an outside perspective who helped me navigate the complex family dynamics. "They're trying," she reminded me when my skepticism threatened to overwhelm my hope. "It's not perfect, it's not how it should have been from the beginning, but they're trying." On a particularly meaningful afternoon, almost 2 years after receiving that letter at the nursing home, I found Jacob, then 12, rummaging through an old box of photographs I had brought from their original home. He was fascinated by the images of a young history teacher and his pianist wife building a life together, raising 2 children, growing old side by side. "Grandpa, you and Grandma look so happy in these pictures," he observed, holding up a picture of Martha and I on our 20th wedding anniversary, surrounded by teenage Nathan and Samantha. "We were happy, Jacob. We didn't have much money, but we had enough. And we had each other." "Didn't you two ever fight?" he asked, with the direct curiosity of a child. "Oh, we fought. Sometimes badly. Your grandmother had quite a temper when provoked. But we always found our way back to each other. That's the secret, you know? It's not never fighting. It's always finding our way back." Jacob nodded thoughtfully, still looking at the photos. "I think Mom and Dad are trying to find their way back to you, Grandpa." "I think so, Jacob. And I'm trying to find my way back to them too." He smiled and continued to explore the treasure trove of memories before him, while I reflected on how much had changed in 2 years. From abandonment in the nursing home to sudden wealth, from anger and resentment to the attempt at genuine reconciliation. Nothing was perfect. Nathan still struggled with his divorce, Samantha still occasionally blurted out comments about the cost of private school, and Derek still calculated business opportunities. But there were also moments of authenticity, of vulnerability, of true family connection. Money had brought us back together. That was undeniable. But what would keep us together, I realized, wouldn't be my uncle's fortune, but each of us' willingness to do the hard emotional work, to have the uncomfortable conversations, to forgive without forgetting, to rebuild trust slowly, day by day. One quiet evening, sitting on the porch of my mansion with Eleanor by my side, watching the lights of Boston in the distance, I reflected on everything that had happened. "You know," I commented, "when I got that letter at the nursing home, my first thought wasn't joy or relief. It was revenge. I wanted to show my children exactly what they had thrown away." Eleanor smiled understandingly. "It's a human response. Anyone would feel that way. But revenge doesn't bring anyone back. It doesn't fill the void Martha left. It doesn't make up for the lost years." "No," she agreed softly. "But maybe the money gave you all a second chance. Not a perfect one, not the way it should have been from the start, but a chance nonetheless." I nodded, thinking about everything I'd gained and lost in the past few years. Martha always said that family is like a complicated puzzle. Not all the pieces fit perfectly, but together they form something complete. She seemed like a very wise woman. Yes, it was. You know what else she said? "William, the true legacy is not what we leave in the bank account, but in the hearts of the people we love." As the stars appeared in the Boston night sky, I reflected on the strange path that had led me there. From the lonely despair of a nursing home to the opulence of a mansion, and finally, to a place of deeper understanding of what truly mattered. Money had changed our circumstances, but the real work of family repair came from the heart, not the bank account. And maybe that was my Uncle Arthur's real gift, not the $77 million, but the opportunity to rediscover, before it was too late, what family really meant. If you identified with my story, please leave a like so it can reach more people who may be going through similar situations. In the comments, tell me, have you ever experienced abandonment or family reconciliation? What part of my journey touched your heart the most? Subscribe to the channel for more real stories like this, where we share experiences that transform us and make us reflect on life's true values. Remember, sometimes the greatest treasures aren't in our bank accounts, but in the human connections we build along the way.